And we're actually going to try to put what we just heard from Sarah into practice with our next speaker. I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Thom Ruhe. He's the Vice President of the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. There he directs the Foundation's programs addressing entrepreneurial education, mentoring, access to capital, and fostering entrepreneurial ecosystems. Thom also cultivates the online curriculum, resources, and communities for Kauffman's flagship resource for entrepreneurs, Entrepreneurship.org. So definitely check that out. And with that, let's give a big boom welcome to Thom Ruhe. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Should I shut off this other mic then?
Well, I understand you can hear me. Unfortunately, I can't hear you.
Hey, can you hear me now, Thom? Can you hear me now? Still can't hear me?
Maybe you can enter questions via the text and then I can just answer.
Sounds good. Can you are you able to hear me now, Thom? Nope, you still can't hear me now.
I can't hear anything.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, we have a bit of a feedback, so I'm going to ask a question, open up the mic, and then quickly shut it. Here is my question, which I will type in the chat for you. How is the Kauffman Foundation advancing entrepreneurship?
Well, I mean, that's a very broad question, Sarah, and thank you for it. As you might know by the history of the foundation, we were charged by our founder, Ewing Marion Kauffman, to really spread the understanding and study the economic phenomena that entrepreneurship can have to the economy. This was as he would call himself, an ordinary man who had extraordinary outcomes, and those outcomes really were the foundation, the underpinnings for our foundation to do the work that he believed in, that entrepreneurship was a path by which ordinary citizens could become extraordinary contributors to their communities, not only in generating wealth for themselves and serving the needs of their families, but having an exponential impact on others in the community. If you were to follow the trajectory of Marion Labs as an example, here was a company that was started in his garage, literally. And at the time that it was acquired by Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals, at that time employing thousands of people, all over the country, many people that were his earliest employees, shared and benefited in that tremendous windfall that came from that acquisition. As a matter of fact, over 350 of his earliest employees, from the woman that worked the reception desk to the gentleman on the loading dock, that became millionaires. And some percentage of those folks, over 50 of them, took that wealth that they had achieved through the exit and started companies of their own. And you can see from that a cascading effect that entrepreneurship has. And it was really that experience that Mr. Kauffman had, that understanding that he had of entrepreneurship, that he knew, long before the word entrepreneurship was in vogue. He understood that concept was a way that we could, maintain a strong nation, support vibrant communities, and share the wealth, so to speak.
Just seeing if you might be able to hear me now. Can you hear me now? Nope. So tell me a little bit about the Kansas City Startup Village.
So all I heard was the last part of that. Tell me about the Startup Village. So I hope that's the question. Good. The Kansas City Startup Village is really one of these things that it's a wonderful thing when you see it, because it's been grown organically. We have this wonderful asset that's coming into Kansas City called Google Fiber, and we were very, very lucky that through a very rigorous competition that Google held, Kansas City was selected to be ground zero for the rollout of this ultra broadband initiative.
Totally jealous.
Oh, for good reason. You should be. When you go and see, as a matter of fact, if I was actually at one of the homes for hackers where I should have been doing this from, it'd be instantaneous. I've been over there to see the speed test. It's unlike any experience you had. It makes this connection almost feel like dial-up. But what it really served, beyond the cool factor, and this might sound somewhat coy, but it really gave an excuse or a reason for the community to organically self-organize around this, perceived and I would say genuine asset, to start some things, again, from scratch. It was something that we could use to attract talent from outside of the region to come to the region. It became the catalyst to organize resources and assets that were here, and more importantly, put some energy into doing this. And it's small things like that. It's in its infancy, so we have yet to see what great things will come from it. But it's small things like that that I'm hopeful can serve as examples or ways to educate policymakers that organic growth, in other words, seeding new things to grow, is a far better alternative to a lot of this, like what we're calling the border war activities, where we try to entice companies to come across a state line or a county line or a city line, and and we do that by throwing tax abatements and all kinds of other resources that really turn out to be little more than a race to the bottom, because there's no real new net gain. It's at somebody else's loss. If we really want to impact the community through economic growth, job creation, wealth creation, we got to do it by launching new things. And so the Startup Village is one of hopefully several more organic activities like that to come that'll help us launch new things.
You're getting applause here in the auditorium. Talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial mindset, because we have a lot of individuals here who are new entrepreneurs. They're looking to start new endeavors. What's your entrepreneurial mindset?
So, mindset is is a name we're using at the moment for a couple of things, to describe a couple of things. I would say, based upon the good fortune I've had to work at the foundation, and I should probably mention that it really is a privilege to work at the Kauffman Foundation. We see that entrepreneurial thinking is more than understanding a playbook of how to start and grow a company. It's a way of thinking that changes how you attack life. It's a question of where your locus of control comes from, internally versus externally. Now, we have said, and we've offered we created actually a new exciting curriculum program called the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program that goes fundamentally to the heart of this entrepreneurial mindset or this entrepreneurial thinking, namely understanding the beliefs, the assumptions, and the actions that drive entrepreneurial behavior. And we would say that in the context of that definition, you don't even have to aspire to start a company to benefit from an entrepreneurial mindset. You could work at a big company and be a much more contributing member of that company by taking certain things of marshaling resources and being efficient and thinking outside the box. We would say it's more or less it's a commitment to a way of life and a way of thinking that sets you apart from the herd and the herd mentality.
Indeed. We are going to open it up for some questions here in the room, and I know that you aren't able to hear me. I know you aren't able to hear me, but just a second. We're going to open it up for some questions here, so feel free to come forward if you have a question for Thom Ruhe. Also want to ask you, since you all have all that great bandwidth there in Kansas City, hopefully you're going to be doing lots of hangouts and lots of video chats, right?
Sure.
Sure.
Although I did need to have one of my staff who's under 30 set this up for me. I'm a kind of a knuckle dragger as it comes to that, because being in your 40s, you can't understand this technology.
That's right. Anybody have a question for Thom Ruhe? No? Going once? Going twice? Yes, we do. Okay, come on up to the microphone. Thom, we have a question. And I'll relay it as we try to figure this out. Go ahead.
So I think that we're all really impressed with the entrepreneurial community in Kansas City and everything that they have with Google Fiber. So I guess my question is, how can Columbia and Kansas City work together to foster growth in both of our cities?
Did you hear that, Thom?
So I'm going to restate it just to make sure I got it. How can Columbia and Kansas City work together to promote entrepreneurship? Was that the question?
Yes.
Well, I think it's, this is a perfect first stepping example, finding ways to collaborate. The foundation is making quite an effort. And last year, 2012, we held easily, by far every measure, record number of events and activities and promotions. We've invested in things outside the region through Silicon Prairie News, Kansas City Pipeline. As a matter of fact, if I'm looking a little bit blurry-eyed today, it's because we had the Black Tie Gala last night for the pipeline. And as a matter of fact, it was I believe a company from Lincoln, Nebraska that won. So we're looking to expand the regional programming. I know for Columbia, you're kind of in the travel zone, but not a destination location. It won't be super easy, but I think making some effort, we'll be able to find ways and have excuses, intentional excuses to find connectivity to the events. I think it's a matter of making somewhat of an effort to be social. I know from the activities we've supported that I've been involved in the nearly 6 years I've been here and in my prior lives and my entrepreneurial endeavors, the collision of networks. The Midwest, it's been said, is a very polite place. And we're very polite in our activities. And sometimes we wouldn't think to, just stick a hand out and say, I have no idea who you are, but I want to ask you questions and I want to learn more from you. Another way I would suggest doing that is look for the entrepreneurs in your community. In too many places, and I'm not saying this specific to Columbia because I wouldn't know enough to say this, but in many places it wouldn't be uncommon that you have great entrepreneurs in your community that are toiling in obscurity. You just don't know them. And it's been my, absolute experience, without exception, that entrepreneurs are very generous with their time. They're very committed to their communities. They're willing to, come and speak at a, coffee breakfast meeting or come to a luncheon or, have a, beer and burger night for something. Look for ways to do that, to engage those folks in your community, and then make sure to tell the world that that's happening so that we can all help elevate, the visibility of the entrepreneurial activity that's happening in your community, because there's just things that you can never plan on that happen in this wonderful collision of networks. There's just, a touch point you didn't know about that connects, and you may never know that that's where the connection came from, but something great comes from it. So I'd encourage you to do things like that, and hopefully we can build more and more visibility between the communities.
Yes, come on up. We have another question for you, Tom. This is from Mary Rodriguez.
Hello, I'm going to try to make this as clear as possible. My big emphasis has always been on education and underserved and at-risk populations. And I was wondering how this whole concept could kind of disintegrate down into working with kids with education and people that are underserved and at-risk populations and helping them to strive, because of course education is the key to wealth or pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And I think entrepreneurship is something that a lot of people might want to do, and they may not know that they had the ability to do that.
New curriculum program, so addressing at-risk, underserved populations and markets. This was the motivation behind the initial creation of the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program as an example. One thing that we understood intuitively is that entrepreneurship is colorblind, socioeconomic blind. Great ideas or at least an entrepreneurial mindset is not exclusively limited to any race, economic background, ethnicity, gender. So to the extent that we can reach these underserved, populations, these at-risk populations, I think we do them a great service in the sense that we offer them an alternative of a self-directed life. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what entrepreneurship holds for you. Now, these populations don't have some of the advantages that others do. So yeah, they probably will have more to overcome, than others might that have, more resources to their availability. But it certainly doesn't preclude them from, achieving some sort of success in their life by pursuing an entrepreneurial mindset as a way of thinking and an approach. I think it's, if I could just go off in a second, I think it's also, though, behooving on our communities to seek these populations out. For too many, they are, they're kind of like in the background. They blend into the background, and they're like, we have blindness to it. And sometimes that means making an effort to go find those populations and recognize that they may likely be suspicious or dubious to our efforts, and that it'll require some, convincing to get them to at least consider engagement and to try, and then be there for them in a mentoring capacity, a support capacity, along the journey, so that when they do stumble, and be sure to let them know that's part of the process. Stumbling, even failing miserably, wonderfully, as we would say, is part of the process. So don't take it as a personal, matter. Look at it instead of as a way that I've learned how not to do something, and take another angle at it, or another approach, and be there for them as they do that. That's very, very critical. And there's no silver bullet in that. One of the observations or conclusions I've come to in the last several years is there's so much being written on new methodologies and new approaches, and lean startups and canvases and minimally viable products, and all that's good, and there's a place for that. I'm not denigrating that at all. But the real secret, I think, is that there is no secret. It just takes effort, and surrounding people willing to put the effort in with others that have a little more experience and can add to that journey. If there was a secret to promoting entrepreneurship, I think that's the secret.
Any other questions for Thom? Yes, come on up. We have another question.
Good morning. My name is Anthony Stanton. I want to kind of touch on a particular subject. I was looking at your website for the foundation, minority entrepreneurship. On the website, you state you've done some research in this particular area. Do you have any white papers or best practices available to the public that we could look at and kind of see what kind of conclusions or recommendations you've come up with as a foundation?
So if I'm understanding the question, are there white papers, resources on promoting minority entrepreneurship? Yeah, I mean, I think I think I would put minority entrepreneurship outreach efforts in the same bucket I would put, supporting entrepreneurship within any particular special interest group or population or, self-organizing group, cohort. There are certain things that need to be for culture, for educational level, for socioeconomic status. There's certain things that need to be, customized to make it relevant to your population. But I think, the same disciplines, the same mechanics, the same, studies and educational resources apply broadly. I think entrepreneurship is one of the wonderful things about it is colorblind. It's more of a question of finding the channel to engage with that population in a relevant way. Again, in the abstract, in the generic, entrepreneurship is one of those topics that has what I like to call a great deal of positive brand confusion. So it's generally positive. You ask 10 people what you think, how would you define entrepreneurship? You'll get 11 answers from 10 people, and they'll vary wildly, but they'll all be generally positive. So the challenge in those trying to serve, a minority population or any other socioeconomic group is making that message relevant to that group. And I'll give you an example specifically. In a prior life to Kaufman, I was the founding chief marketing officer of an organization called JumpStart in Northeast Ohio. And our minority inclusion efforts were under my responsibility. And one of the things that we noticed in a lot of our social networking activities is that we weren't getting a great number of minorities to join us. And so we had to really ponder this notion of like, how did we make the community more broadly aware of our services? So, we turned to the faith-based organizations. The black churches are an incredibly effective and powerful social tool within the African American community, and it was amazing once we were able to convince the pastors of these churches that we had a service that would be hopefully advantageous to their flock, that they would allow us access to mention and I don't want to get too I don't want to get too missionary here, but that we could preach the gospel of entrepreneurship, so to speak. So I think it's behooving on those that seek to serve these groups, whatever they are, to understand how you have to massage the message to make it relevant. But then once you're in, again, the mechanics, the how-tos, that applies for everybody equally. And I think that's, again, one of the reasons why entrepreneurship is a very powerful tool for our economy.
Powerful tool indeed. Tom, I know you can't hear me. Adrian, if you would wish him well, tell him.
I actually can hear you.
You can. Well, isn't that convenient at the end? I'm so glad that we were able to communicate in this way. And you know what? We are jealous about, I was at the Fiberhood, and interesting to see all of the cafes and the businesses that have popped around. Anna's Cafe, I don't know if you've been there,
Yep.
but really concrete steps that Kansas City and Columbia might be able to work together, because very jealous of that bandwidth and what we could do with that as far as video technology and elsewhere. Just that's very important and a very great question. Before I have Tom go, does anybody else want to weigh in? None?
One question.
Yes, one more question.
Hopefully this one doesn't take too long.
No.
Tom, thank you for your time this morning. My name is Michael Fry. Just a very general question, and I know it's probably very broad, but in the next 24 months, what topic or what thing are you the most excited about?
Great question. Thank you for it. There's actually a couple, if you'll indulge me 1 or 2 more minutes. I think one big one. So one of my passions, we have supported high growth entrepreneurship for years, and that's kind of what we're known for. But we're now expanding that to be also including much more of what we're calling democratization of entrepreneurship. Let's figure out ways to really mass market this notion, again, that entrepreneurship is not the exclusive purview for somebody that could afford an Ivy League education or grew up on one of the coasts. So in that auspice of democratizing entrepreneurship, a development that we're watching with very keen interest is crowdfunding. For too long, the kind of access to capital market has been controlled by private equity, and I'm not casting any dispersions on private equity markets, the venture capital angel networks. They've been very vital to the growth of the economy and supporting this high growth entrepreneurship. But I think crowdfunding is going to open up wonderful new avenues for individuals that historically have not had access to the kind of capital, growth capital that they're going to need. The SEC is still working through the rules of engagement, so to speak. I'm disappointed that they've delayed yet again, but I'm happy and hopeful that they're, let's just say hopeful, that they're taking the extra time because they're giving it very careful consideration. I contributed to a story in the New York Times on this just a month ago, and as I was quoted in that piece as saying, we should, with this advent of this new opportunity, I'll call it new technology, frankly, in entrepreneurship, the crowdfunding, we should expect that there's going to be problems. There will be, fraudulent activities. It's too ripe for that not to happen. But I would say that let's not overreact when that happens, and let's work out the kinks. It's a new technology. It's an evolution that will have its bumps like anything else. So I'm very, very excited for and hopeful how that's going to change, and we're going to watch that with great interest. The other second big thing that we see is academia is going through. I want to correct that. It's already in the middle of a bubble bursting that's happening. The schools being the last bastion, the last word in repository of knowledge, that paradigm is shifting. It's blowing up, and you can now get a world-class education from multiple sources, free and from anywhere in the world. And we're watching with more than significant interest as to how, as an industry, this is impacting academia. There is I have some concern that there is just a large block sticking their head in the sand on this. As a matter of fact, I'm heading to San Diego next week. I'll be keynoting the AACC, the American Association of Community College Workforce Development Institute conference. And we're trying to take this message that we think community colleges in particular can serve as hubs of regional ecosystems promoting entrepreneurship. And I'm trying to convince this population, namely the community colleges, that this more than ever, I think, is an opportunity for community colleges to find parity with four-year schools. Because, as the New Yorker once famously said years and years and years ago with that famous dog cartoon, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, right? So if you have access to world-class education, and these are available now free and broadly from any source, and you can put it out there and you can connect with your student base in a relevant way, and that means being understanding that education is shifting to experiential based, much more relevant to the way the economy works today. If schools can figure that out and then engage the local entrepreneurial ecosystem to augment that, you're going to have a special opportunity there. But more importantly, you're going to be a rich contributing partner in your communities that you serve. And that just means thinking about things differently. Maybe challenging some of the sacred cows of that industry about tenure and what even qualifies as a professor. I like to say tongue-in-cheek, I would gauge the quality of an institution of higher education by the number of adjunct faculty that they have. Because, that's the proxy for, you didn't go through all the credentialing, you don't have the academic CV, so we have to give you this title. But those are usually people with real-world experience that are coming in and offering, from an experiential standpoint, much more relevant content and experiences for the students. And I would encourage, anybody in that capacity to, blur the lines and get messy and let, the students or the populations you serve experience this and be there to support them along the way. So I'm sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
No, that's completely all right. We so appreciate that answer, and I would love to chat with you sometime about what MIT is doing in that regard, as far as opening up the free programs. We have some individuals in our Hangouts. Feel free to chat with Thom Ruhe. We are going to take a short break now. We'll be back here in actually, we will not take a short break. Sean Siebert is going to come up. He has a very special guest who he's going to introduce. Thom Ruhe, thank you so much. The conversation continues in our Hangout. You are getting applause as we speak. Thank you.